Well, my name is Richard Lewis Bitter Jr. I am officially Dr. Richard L. Bitter Jr. I have a plethora of degrees. I have a SJD, which is the PhD of Law in Constitutional Law from American University, and I was a criminal law fellow at the University of Buffalo, which is at the time when I was doing it, was a research and teaching position. I had no idea I would fall in love with the Constitution until the second week of law school. 3/4 of the population of New York lives on 1/5 of the land area. But that group of people concentrated, in Westchester County and in the counties of the city determine life for us up here. Why I'm involved with this movement is they're taking away my rights as a citizen. My rights, not only in my property, but my right to exercise my rights guaranteed under the Constitution within reasonable parameters. And I think that we need to have a voice. We have no voice.
Their common goal is breaking free from the Big Apple, dividing New York into upstate and downstate.
And I've seen too much of New York State politics, how they cave to the New York City side.
For too long, residents of upstate New York have been denied opportunity, denied growth, denied hope.
And here at Tedeschi's in Great Bend, two different businesses in two different states, but with one very big difference in the cost of doing that business.
When I put out my first story, it was picked up everywhere nationally. And people were really on board with it. They wanted to become a part of it. They wanted to support it. And then other people thought it was completely insane and crazy, which I understand. So it's been a mixed reaction for the most part over these last couple months.
I'm John Bergener Jr. and I'm chair of the Divide New York State Caucus. And I love this area. I grew up in upstate my whole life. I've only moved about 5 miles from where I grew up, and things are starting to decline, and you can see it. The southern tier and the northern part of the state is the worst parts. So there's some decline towards the Buffalo area. The capital region is declining a little less, but if you go south of the capital region, that's also declining. The idea was we needed something that would produce jobs in upstate New York, because they're all leaving. And it's because of overregulation for the most part, because if you cross into Pennsylvania or you cross into Vermont, there are good paying jobs.
It appears to me right now everything goes the way New York City does, because that's where the majority of the population. Well, if we could cut our ties there, then they could have their rules and we could have ours. 151,000 people leave New York State every year. 151,000. So what is it we're doing wrong? We have no jobs. Kids go to school, they can't get a job here. Where do they have to go? I don't know where they're going. How do we attract people here? We attract people here by offering them opportunities for growth, opportunities for jobs. I just don't see this happening the way our government is set up here now.
Anyway, this is my grandson. This is Richard Lewis Bitter IV. And by the way, all 4 of the Richard Lewis Bitters are still alive. And occasionally we have pictures of the 4 of us all together. But he just turned 5 on October 28th. He's lived with me all of his life. I've never spoken to him like he was a baby. I never used baby talk, and I never spoke to him in any manner than I normally speak to anybody.
My shoe. How did my shoe get stuck?
We're here on the back acreage of my farm in Haleigh, New York, which is in the Finger Lakes just north of Watkins Glen. And we got about, I think there's like 45 acres under cultivation. The rest of my property is in woods. The fracking issue is a big one. It meant a lot of money to me. The other thing that affects me is the SAFE Act. There's a whole lot of people who have no desire to carry a gun. And I understand that. God bless them. That's their right. There's a whole lot of us who decided we'd like to carry a gun, and that's our right. And just because they don't feel it's a right that they choose to exercise doesn't mean that they have the right to take it away from me.
And so they're proposing a different route, which would be to create 2 autonomous regions under the rubric or under the guide structure of some kind of overall state authority. What that does is it removes the federal government from having to ratify what's done, but it still leaves a great deal of a great many questions at the state level about how those municipal or how those autonomous regions would be structured, what powers would they have, how would they be connected as part of some kind of a state. And those kinds of questions are really pretty unprecedented in American political history.
And other changes would have to come through the regional legislature to cause us to be different.
My name is Chris Hopkins. As a father and a husband and a father of 3 sons, and recently a grandfather, a lot of this stuff is more concerned for their future than mine, so I need to get involved in stuff. I think the government is more downstate focused than upstate. You know, nobody wants to go to the bad old days of where people could do anything they want with business and dump a mohawk. But on the other hand, I think there's so much burdensome regulations that it's chasing businesses out of New York. And it is a hard sell. But you know, if anything's ever going to happen, it first has to start with you.
Taxes are overbearing in New York State. I don't believe it's run properly.
We're taxed too much.
And one of the things that they're talking about is creating a constitutional convention, or to include Divide New York as part of a constitutional convention. The established political authorities and powers are going to have power and authority in a constitutional convention if it happens.
They're going to have to vote on anyway. So it's not like we're going to have a constitutional convention and John and I are going to get this done and nobody else is going to have a say in it. It doesn't work like that. There's a lot of checks and balances here.
People think it's a crazy story, so they think it's fueled by crazies. They're not crazy. I understand their battle and I hear their cry, what they want to do. They want change because they work in a state that is so divided. I don't think there's any other state in the country that is as divided as New York is. And they are sitting in Conklin, New York, and looking over to Susquehanna County, Pennsylvania. They see that their land is the same as their neighbors, and they are losing hundreds and thousands of dollars because of state regulations that are put upon them. They're not crazy people, they're good people, and they have a good message, and honestly, they have a good foundation for fighting for that message.
People feel like government is not working for them, and they're trying to find alternative ways to express their grievances, to influence the government. And to make a place where their voices can be heard.
About gun rights, property rights. And property rights, you know, when I talk about property rights, I'm not just talking about land. Property is everything that you own. And our rights have been severely limited in all of it. These are rights that I had, and they were taken away. Was I compensated for them? No. I was into sugaring, but it's too dangerous to do with him around. It's, you know, sap boiling, it's, you know, a couple 100 degrees and all that. It's just too dangerous. But this is the sugar house down there, and this is our blueberry patch, which I planted about 7 years ago. It takes blueberries forever to grow. But we had many gallons of blueberries this year, and the next year they'll be probably out of control. So I call friends and tell them to come take all they want. But what we would like to do is, for federal purposes, we're one state. We are the state of New York. But for state administrative purposes, we're 2 separate administrative districts. They can keep the title New York. They got the city. Wonderful city if you want to visit a city. Wonderful place. You know, we have New Amsterdam, you know, is the big name that everybody goes for, and that's fine.
So it would be New Amsterdam and New York.
New York. For state purposes. For practical purposes, we would keep the same state legislative and state senate districts as we have now. It's very important to me for my grandchildren to enjoy more rights than I have. I want to see rights restored, not just preserve the rights that we have. I want rights restored. People have tolerated for a long time the surrender of rights, not just on a state level, on a federal level, but particularly in New York on a state level. We've surrendered rights over the years, an inch at a time, and now we're a mile past the goal line. And something has to change. And we can't change as long as we're controlled by the city.
Hey, I'll put the hand ahead of you.
See you later, mister.